Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint the library with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch black painted canvas. You can customize the words on the books. I did grace, joy, love, peace, faith, happiness. You can put your favorite book titles on there or whatever you want. So this is a highly customizable painting. Let's go over brushes and colors. So we'll be using a 3/4 inch flat wash. This is a Princeton Velvet Touch brush. This is a 12 Bright Royal and Langnickel Majestic brush, and then these two are also Princeton Velvet Touch. Number 8 round and a number 4 round. The 3 Princeton brushes actually come together in a pack, which is nice. You'll need a ruler for drawing shelves and those books, and either a piece of white chalk or a white chalk pencil. I recommend the white chalk pencil actually because you can get some finer lines in that, but so this is the white chalk pencil. It erases easily. A black paint pen for writing the words on the book. And colors. So gold is an optional color if you want to add some gold accents to the decorating of the books. And bright aqua green. Some of these colors are customizable too if you want to change the colors of the books. Raw sienna, Alizaren crimson hue, phthalo blue, primary yellow, hooker's green hue, permanent titanium white, and Mars black. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with a blank canvas that is pre-painted black. So you can use Mars black paint, or you can even use like apple barrel black craft paint to paint it one coat, and you'll cover your canvas. And we're going to start by drawing the composition of this painting. I made 2 marks at 7.5 inches. So this is going to be the bottom line of the top shelf. So if you're using a different size canvas, this top shelf is a little bit higher than the center of the canvas, and draw a horizontal line across. So the width of the shelf is about 1 inch wide. Make little marks 1 inch above that, and then a horizontal line across. These measurements do not have to be exact. You just want to give yourself enough room. So our bottom shelf down here is also 1 inch. So 1 inch from the bottom edge of the canvas, and then make a mark and draw a horizontal line. You can estimate these measurements. They do not have to be exact, especially if you're working on a larger or smaller size canvas. Let's go ahead and paint our shelves first. So I'm going to load my paint palette with the color Raw Sienna, Mars Black, and Titanium White. So the Mars Black and Titanium White are going to help us get variations of color in this light golden brown color that is the Raw Sienna. I'm going to first darken this color. So I'm going to take my Raw Sienna and add a teeny tiny bit of black in there, and also add a little bit of white in there to kind of tone it down a little bit. It's going to create more of a neutral brown color. As I'm painting this with my number 12 bright brush, by the way, I am doing horizontal paint strokes, and I decided to get some painter's tape. So this is actually going to help me get those lines to be nice and sharp. You don't have to use painter's tape, you can just paint it in, but I felt like getting that painter's tape out and just kind of pressing firmly on the edge, and then I'm going to just fill in the rest of this. So I am, as I'm loading my brush, grabbing different amounts of black, brown, and white, doing horizontal paint strokes, and letting that kind of blend together. So it should show up on the canvas. If it's getting too kind of dim, add a little bit of white in there, that kind of brightens it up. But also we want to create this fake wood texture, and to create that wood grain, we want like different variations of brown in there that kind of gently blend, and we want the paint to kind of blend but look streaky, and it gives us that 2-toned or 3-toned look in that brown. So you want to fill up that entire shelf. So when you're done, gently lift the painter's tape off. You can also just let it dry and then lift it off, but I usually get impatient with it and lifted off before, and I want to reuse my tape. So I'm going to place it, I'm going to be very careful about this, place it on the edge where I painted it earlier. And of course, if you mess up and your brown goes outside of your line, you can always go back and touch up with black paint and fill the background back. And then same exact technique using the raw sienna, and then add little bits of brown or little bits of black and white in there to create some variation in your brown. Raw sienna tends to show up against the black canvas because it's a bright color, but adding more white in there helps to brighten that up a little bit more. And then little bits of black in there create some shadowing and dark variations in our wood, and you're just gently doing left and right paint strokes. I'm going to get another piece of painter's tape here and do the bottom edge of this shelf. This is just regular painter's tape like you use to paint a wall in your house. You just want to be careful because sometimes it will lift off like the black background if you put it on directly or put it on too hard. You can lift some of the stickiness off the tape first if you're worried about that. Little bits of black in there, little bits of white, just to create this brown, and then gently lift off the tape. If you notice that you need to touch anything up, you can go back with black paint and touch up. But that is the first layer of shelving. I'm going to rinse my 12 bright brush off and set that to the side and get my number 8 long round brush. So I'm using this brush specifically for the tip of the brush because I'm going to paint some fine wood grain detail with this. If you don't have this particular brush, use any kind of tiny round brush, or you can even do this with a paint pen actually. So load your brush in a little bit of water and kind of roll your brush with the black. You want to make sure your paint is right there on the end of the bristles. And we're just going to paint some texture on the shelves. So I'm just doing these like a cat eye shape and then lines that contour around the curves to create little knots in the wood, little horizontal lines, and that creates that faux wood grain texture on our shelves. So if you want to skip this step because you're simplifying this painting, you can. You don't have to go into detail and paint the intricate wood texture. If your shelves actually were not dry all the way and it's blending too much with the brown, you may want to let it dry a little bit before doing this step. Also, it helps to add a little bit of water into your black to create these thin lines. I'm doing the same exact thing to the top shelf. Next, I'm going to rinse my brush and add some white in to the brush. So I'm going to rinse it off completely, dry it, pinch the bristles, and grab white right there in the end of the bristles and just do a few kind of loose white lines in the wood and just gives it a little bit of texture variation. And you don't have to do this either if you want to skip this step. Next, we're going to add a little bit of color to the back of our bookshelf. So if you want, you can leave it black, or you can take your 12 bright brush. So I'm taking black and the raw sienna. So this is really dark brown. And I don't want it to show up bright because I'm going to lose my contrast later with my books. I want this to be very dark, subtle brown. And I'm just adding this texture in the background of the bookshelf. So I'm just taking my brush, and this is just black and raw sienna, and I'm just flip-flopping my brush, creating these expressive, abstract paint strokes on the back of my bookshelf. This must be very, very dark. You don't want to get this bright at all. And I'm going to do the exact same thing to the top bookshelf. If you find that the brown, the raw sienna, is making it too bright, add more black into it. We want to wait for all of this to completely dry before we can do the next step. So rinse your brushes off, set those to the side, dry your painting or take a break and come back. And we're going to be drawing our books and pot for the plant next. So I'm using a white chalk pencil. I'm going to start in the lower left of our bookshelf and I'm going to do a rounded face. So this is a basic circle, and if you mess up with this chalk pencil again, it does erase easily. So I'm just going to redo my circle really quick. This circle, let's have it just slightly overlap that bottom shelf. So do a circle and then a little oval on top of that circle to create an opening in the vase. We can adjust this later when we paint this in. And then there's a pathos plant inside of this vase. So I'm going to start with one leaf kind of hanging out on the left. And pathos plants are leaves that are on these kind of wavy vines. The leaves almost resemble these kind of heart shapes. So I'm going to do a couple vines that come out of the vase and then small kind of heart-shaped leaves attached to the vines. It does look pretty if you have one of the vines kind of going down and then resting on the shelf. It kind of makes it look more like the plant is on the shelf and not just floating. And then let's start with our books. So with the books, I recommend that you use a ruler. I'm going to start with this guy and just do a rectangle shape and then a curve at the top. So we mostly in this painting only see the spines of the books, except there are a few that are at an angle where we'll see part of the cover. So you want to do, you can copy my exact composition, or you can, if you want to switch it up, you can. You can change the thickness of the book and the thinness to make different variations in that. If you want a book on its side, we're going to do an angle, and then I'm going to do a curve down for the spine because this one's kind of sticking outwards. and then an angle. There's going to be a lot of forced perspective in this, and it doesn't have to look realistic. So we can see kind of the pages of this book. And then maybe some overlapping over here for this kind of smaller book on the left. Either the plants going behind or in front of the book. We can decide that later when we paint it in. I'm going to erase this leaf and just kind of get it out of the way for now. So then we can do some more books on the top of our bookshelf, the top shelf. And I'm going to do a book that is lying flat on the shelf. So this one is going to actually hold that little flower pot. So we see the pages and the spine of the book is going curved, and then we can see either the top or bottom cover. And this book only takes up about half of the bookshelf. You can see kind of the placement of it. We still have half of our space left on the left side for drawing more books. I'm going to do a little flower pot resting on this book. Little feet for the flower pot, and then a little half circle shape on top of that. There is a traceable for this. If you are using a tracer, because our background is dark, you'll probably need to get white graphite paper to get that to show up. There is such thing as white graphite paper, and it's pretty much the same as the dark graphite paper, only it shows up with lighter lines and it'll show up against your dark background. And I'm going to do another book. We just see the spine of the book. So rectangle shape with the curve at the top. This one, I'm going to do another book on its side. So we want to do a curve downwards and then 2 diagonal lines. And then you can see maybe part of the book. Again, forced perspective. It's not going to be photographic realism. And maybe change the angle of this. Or maybe when we paint it in later, it'll make more sense. I'm actually going to make this book go the opposite way. Have it go like this. But again, if you're doing a book that's going angled, you want the curved part to be curving downwards like this. And then we're still going to have this go back this way. And then maybe this one's going at an angle. And then another straight book. This is a fun composition to play around with. If you feel super creative, you can add different things on your bookshelf. I'm not going to draw the flowers out. Those are going to be painted in, but this is just the basic shapes and lines that I need to get started. We're going to move on to painting, and I'm going to use the number 12 bright brush. I'm going to start by painting the pot on the lower left, and this is going to be a bright aqua green pot and titanium white, and this is the number 12 bright brush. You're welcome to change the color of this pot, but I'm going to double load my 12 bright brush in both the bright aqua green in the white. I'm just going to start by painting this circle. Because my drawing was very sketch-like, I am going to adjust my circle. So that means I might go outside the lines, or I might not paint the line all the way. The white and the aqua grain are blending together and creating different variations, and that's kind of what I want. So I outlined the circle, and then I'm just going to fill this in using paint strokes that are still going in a curved circular direction. I like how that white looks not blended all the way. I go back and really define the circle. And then I'm going to take some white and just kind of do some white scribble paint strokes in there and leave it. Gives it that shiny look. So I'm going to rinse my brush off next, and I am going to paint the spines of the books. So I'm actually going to rinse my water out, get some fresh water, because I want to use the pure white color to kind of prime the layer of the books. Because we're working on a dark background, adding a white layer first is going to help brighten our painting. So load your 12 bright brush in titanium white. Kind of wipe it off a little bit. You don't need a lot of white on this because we're sort of doing a dry brush effect here, where we don't need it to be 100% covered up. I'm doing the bottom of the book. So when we drew these, we did not draw a curve on the bottom, but as I'm painting this in, I added a curve pointing down on the bottom of the spine, and then the top of the book has a curve painted up. So I'm going to paint each of these books, and look at how there's still dark background showing through. So we do not want a very solid white. We're dry brushing this. That means it's not going on solid. We see some background. In fact, I'm going to make sure that there's some extra darkness in between each of the books. I don't want to lose the shape of my book, so I want it to be distinct. I can see both of those books. There's like a black line between those books. They're not blending in together. I'm going to do this to this book. Outline it with the white. Do your curve on the bottom as well. And then your spine, do up and down vertical paint strokes. Leave a little slither of black background between the books so it stands out. It also helps us when we do our color layer that there will be shadow there anyway, because the books next to each other, there's a little bit of shadow where the books touch. So I'm stressing this. We're not going over it with multiple layers of white. We're leaving it very dry, kind of see-through. I can use the end of my brush to outline the shape, but the spine of the book, see how that's going curved? I'm using the full width of the brush to kind of create these curved strokes on the spine, kind of starts giving it a little bit of shape. And then these strokes are going diagonal on the cover of the book. You can outline the back cover. I'm going to leave this, it's like the pages. See how I left a little bit of a dark where the cover is and where the pages start? And do the same thing to our books on the top shelf. So this one, we see the front and back cover. I can use the end of my brush to do that, and then the full width of the brush for the pages, but leave black between each of those so it doesn't just disappear. And the spine of the book goes in a curve. Vertical strokes for the spine. This one, curve on the bottom and curve on the top, going in a vertical direction with your paint strokes. If you need to use your ruler to help kind of line things up, you can. This one gets a little bit tricky. We're going to make it look like this book that's kind of slanted, like it's kind of behind the book on the right. So there's a little bit of overlapping. On this book, we have it kind of slanted. So we see the spine of this book and it's going to curve on the bottom as well. So outlining the shape first kind of helps, and then doing the full width of the brush to create curved paint strokes all the way down the spine of the book. And then pages and the front and back cover are visible. And then I'm going to use the full width of the brush to kind of drag these paint strokes for the cover at an angle and let it just kind of disappear. It's going to get kind of shadowy over here anyway. And then we have our last book over here. Can outline the sides of the spine and curved paint strokes. We can even just drag our brush vertically. I'm going to rinse my 12 bright and start with the color. So I'm going to do the Pathos plant next, and this is the color Hooker's Green Hue. I'm also going to load Mars Black and Primary Yellow onto my palette. I'll be using the number 8 long round brush, and I'm going to start by loading it in black, and I'm going to paint a little opening for my vase. So I'm going to do like a little oval shape. If you end up losing the back rim, that's fine. So a little oval with the black at the very top. I'm going to rinse and dry and go back with my white and aqua and do a little rim around that with the white and the aqua. Be careful not to smudge the black. I'm going to go around that oval, and then back here we see the little rim in the back. The fun thing about black canvas paintings is you can easily touch up things that you go outside the lines or mess up and paint over it easily. That's the case with acrylic painting in general. Just going back and touching up the sides of my vase. I like how this white looks on the side. Gave it a little highlight with the white. Then, so I have white on my brush and I grabbed some green. So I'm going to start with the stem, center part of the leaf, and it's almost like you're drawing a heart with your brush, but the curvy inward part of the heart didn't really go inwards. Some of the leaves they will. So do the outline of the leaf and then fill it in. So I have my brush double loaded in green and white, and that helps the green to show up on the dark background. So there's one leaf, and then our next one, we're going to do the vine part and then do each individual leaf. So I'm not going with my drawing completely, and that's okay. Any leftover chalk will erase. So I'm doing green and white, different variations of that. The white really helps it to stand out. Again, if you want to think of these leaves like upside down hearts, you can just paint like upside down hearts if that makes it easier. So this one looks a lot like a heart. And you just fill it in with different variations of that green and the white. I like not blending it all the way. I like to have different tones in that green, of different tints of green with the white. So there's my next little vine, the one that's going to be resting on the shelf. I can do a little leaf that's just on the shelf and fill it in. Another leaf over here. This is the one that I erased earlier, but I'm going to add that back in. We can decide later if maybe this one wants to overlap a book or go behind it. I am going to add some yellow to my brush, yellow and white, and actually do this before these dry all the way. On one side of the leaf, I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow, and that just creates some really pretty, almost highlighting for the leaf, pretty yellow accent. There's another little leaf. I can make this one overlap the front of the pot. So maybe there's another leaf that's just kind of sticking up over here. And then this one. I'm going to rinse my brush and load it into black because I'm going to do a little bit of shadowing under the vase and under the leaf that's resting on the shelf. So still using the number 8 round brush, add a little bit of black. So under here, I'm just going to do little curved lines, and that gives some shadow under both of those objects and makes it look like they're more part of the shelf. And next I'm going to start painting the books. So let's start with the color Alizaren Crimson Hue. And I'm going to use the number 12 bright brush for this. I'm going to load that into this Alizaren Crimson, which is like a dark magenta color. If you don't have this color, you can use a quinacridone magenta or really any color you want. You can change the color palette of these books. So I'm going to paint these in with this, and we're going to go over the white that we just painted. So still kind of the same thing, using curved on the top and bottom of the spine and then vertical strokes this way. And because we allowed like the side of it to be dark, it'll already, when you paint over this, it'll already be dark in those areas to the point where we don't have to go back and shadow, although we can go back and add shadows. I'm going to grab a little bit of white. So this is white and the Alizaren Crimson, and I'm just adding it kind of in the middle of the spine area, just to kind of brighten up that center part of the spine. I'm going to use more of that magenta color to really kind of line up the edges of the shape. I'm going to load more titanium white onto my palette and grab a little bit more white. So in the center of that spine, add a little bit more white and then curvy paint strokes. Because the center part of the spine is brighter in the sides of the book, especially the side towards the book on the right is darker, but we already have dark shadowing in there from earlier when we left it black. But if you want, you can add a little bit of black on that side to make it darker. Just a little bit more white, curved paint strokes to fill that in. So I'm going to do this technique pretty much for each of the books, but change colors. So for the next book, I'm going to do green. So this is the Hooker's green hue. I'm going to grab a little bit of aqua actually. So I'm going to mix. So if you mix the green and the aqua together, kind of gives you a different kind of green that you can work with. Outline the edges of the book and fill them in with curved paint strokes. So edge, and then use the full width of the brush to curve fill it in. A little bit of white, and then I'm going to go back and do a little bit of light color and let that white just kind of blend in with that green. And I'm going to rinse and go, I'm going to take a little bit of black actually and add a little bit of black towards the bottom of the book. It creates just a little bit of shadowing on the bottom of the book. Next, this is the color Phthalo Blue, so I'm going to do the next book with Phthalo Blue. I'm going to rinse my brush off completely, grab my blue, curved paint strokes, and then use the edge of the brush to do the edging of the side of the book. So you'll notice the direction of your curves do switch. So these ones are curving this way, and then these ones are curving this way. Eventually they get flat and straight right in the center. Do a little bit of white and do that kind of curvy thing with the white, blend it in with the blue. Gives it a little bit of highlighting. The top of the book. Rinse, and I'll do a little bit of black. So that was just black. Sorry you couldn't see my palette right there, but I loaded just a little bit of black on my brush. I'm wiping it off because I don't want this. I'm already working with a lot of dark here. Just a little bit of black to kind of dry brush this and get it just a bit shadowy without making the book disappear. So a little bit of dark shadowing, especially where it meets the green book on the left. A little bit of shadowing in that area, shadowing on the bottom. And then let's do aqua. So this is bright aqua green for our slanted book. So this spine, we can outline the edge and then curve. This kind of just disappears in the corner of the bookshelf. And these are curving. A little bit of white, and we can kind of highlight that curve. Gives it a little bit of form when we mix that white into that aqua. And then we're going to paint the front cover. Just drag your paint strokes outwards. And then a little bit of dark shadow. This would be shadowy right here. So I'm taking the black and kind of blending that with the blue, making it darker. We can even go darker if we want. And then the spine part, that one's lighter. I'm gonna rinse my brush off and take some white. I'm gonna do the pages again. So these, make them a little bit brighter. We can go back with a paint pen later and do some black lines in there to give it some texture to make it look like pages, or we can leave it simple. So then we have more books we can paint. I'm switching to a number 4 round brush. This might make it a little bit easier because we have a smaller area right here, the book cover. So I'm using the 4 round to paint this in, Alizaren Crimson, and I'm using my ruler to help line that up, the curved part of the spine as well. And then we have the bottom part of the cover. And then rinse your brush and dry it, and I'm going to repaint the pages of the book. So horizontal paint strokes. We can leave a little bit of dark kind of showing through where it meets the red magenta color. And later on, we can go back and do black lines for pages. I'm actually going to rinse and take black and outline this curve right here. And then the part where the cover touches the pages, this, I'm going to do a very thin black line. I'm just going to be careful not to smudge white paint that might not be dry all the way. So we have black line and black line. And then I'm going to take my 8 round and pinch the bristles really good and take the black and actually do the little page lines. So I'm just going to take this and kind of flick my brush like this. So if it's blending too much with the white, let it dry and come back to this step. We don't have to take that line and make it tedious and go all the way across. I'm just doing very loose, just kind of flicking my brush left and right, and that creates a little bit of page texture. And then I'll go ahead and do the same thing for this book right here that we can see the pages as well. So do that little curve and then a black line where the cover meets the edge, the pages, and then very loose diagonal lines for page texture. I'm going to rinse my brush off next and paint the little blue vase or little blue pot that's on top of the dark magenta book that's laying on its side. I'm going to go back and use the number 4 round brush. Take my Phthalo Blue, a little bit of white. Phthalo Blue is a very dark color. It won't show up very well on a dark background, but adding a little bit of white in there will quickly brighten that blue. So I'm going to kind of just outline the shape of that vase and then fill it in with blue and white. Let it kind of blend together, but not blend together all the way. And then the little bit of highlight on the right, kind of outline the inner shape of it with white, and then the little feet. I'm going to rinse the number 4 round brush, and I'm going to continue painting the books on the left, and I'm going to use primary yellow for the next book. So this is the number 12 bright brush, and just yellow, and fill this book in. So curve on the top and bottom, outline the edges. I'm going to add a little bit of white to my brush so it's double loaded in white and yellow. Let that lighter yellow color just kind of blend with the book at the top. We can do vertical paint strokes to fill in the rest of the spine so it's a little bit brighter at the top. We are going to add some black towards the bottom of this book for some shadow. So without rinsing the brush, add a teeny bit of black, wipe it off a little bit so it's only a little bit of black. We don't want this to be very, very dark, so just a little smudge of dark at the bottom gives it some shadow. Rinse the brush, and the next book I'm going to do green, so Hooker's Green Hue. And this book is going to be, it's slightly behind the yellow book somehow. I'm going to just kind of outline the edges, do your curved strokes. Grab a little bit of black on your brush to do that shadow thing again on the bottom. So that little smudge of darkness, you can kind of drag it up a little bit. Smudge of darkness on the side where it's kind of next to that yellow book. Then I'm going to do the highlight for this book. So rinse the brush off completely, dry, grab green and white. So at the top, do your little curved marks, smudge it down towards the middle. And then I'm going to do the next book. So this one's going to be Alizaren Crimson. I'm going to start with just my pure color of Alizaren Crimson, and we'll start with the spine curvy paint strokes. We're basically just filling it in how you painted it initially with the white. I'm going to use my ruler to help me kind of edge this. This one's actually going to slightly overlap the green book. I'm going to get more white on my paint palette for the highlight. Just a little bit of white, and then do those curved paint strokes towards the top. So we are shadowy at the bottom and lighter at the top. This one, I'm actually going to bring that lighter color towards the bottom. So we have, I guess it's more highlighted towards the bottom of this book. But we can do a lot of shadowing over here for the side of the book, back cover. So using full width paint strokes, make it go in that kind of diagonal direction. I'm going to wipe my brush off and do a little bit of black. And then right here, kind of blend that black in the back. So we get that shadow color. I'm going to switch to the number 4 round and do the pages with that brush. So you just kind of outline the shape of the pages, and then you want to go in that diagonal direction. Just kind of drag your brush to the top edge of the canvas. I'm going to take a little bit of black. I know I did this earlier with the 8 round, but I'm just going to do it with this one. Kind of drag your darker page strokes to create the page texture. If you want to do it with the 8 round, you can if you prefer it that way. And I'm going to get more alizarin and white and kind of go back over this front page cover that we see. Alright, so all my brushes, and we have one more book to paint. This one we're going to do Aqua, and we have some overlapping going on, so this actually needs to be in front of that magenta one, so I'm going to have to kind of cover parts of it. Use my ruler to help line that up, because some of our magenta book covered this one, but this one's going to be in front. Take your titanium white and do your little curve paint strokes. That'll give you some more dimension in your book. And I decided to get some phthalo blue and change this color up a little bit. Phthalo blue blends nicely with bright aqua green. Give it some dark smudges with that dark blue. I'm going to take my black and right here, make sure that part is outlined, kind of more defined. I'm going to take some more black on my brush, and I did this without rinsing the blue off, but we're going to add just like a little bit of shadowing, very lightly, dry brush, not very, very thick paint, just lightly add some shadowing under your books. And because I didn't rinse the blue off, I got a little bit of blue in the shadowing, but I decided I kind of liked that. And next, I'm going to do a little bit of outlining work with I'm going to do this with the 8 round brush, or actually this is the 4 round brush. I'm going to load it in the black. So right here, the inner part of the book spine, and this line right here, I'm outlining very loosely. It just means I'm not making this line very thick. It's a very thin line. Down here, this is outlined. So it's wherever you think you need like a little bit of pop and definition in your shapes. And then I'm going to do, kind of outlined that already, but I kind of re-outlined that, and as well as the bottom part of the book. I'm going to outline this inner part and this line. And then this line. Adding a little bit of black in your, or a little bit of water in your black helps to loosen that and makes it so your line can be a little bit more controlled. I'm actually just kind of adjusting this shape. And next is the fun part. We get to decorate more of our bookcase. I'm going to start by doing the flower and adding a little highlight over here on the little blue vase. So I took my round brush in titanium white and just kind of highlighted the inner outline of the shape of that, and it just kind of gives it a little bit of brightness. And then I'm going to do the rose. So I have my brush double loaded in white and Alizaren crimson. So I like to do these decorative roses by starting with just like a little circle. So this is Alizaren in white circle, and then the circle I end up like the edges of it, you can kind of see a petal shape. So it's not really a circle, it's kind of like a wobbly edge to the circle. So it's got that kind of rose shape if you're looking at the rose directly head on. And then without rinsing, I'm going to grab white, and then I like to start in the center of the rose and make a little curved mark. So this white is adding that kind of highlight edge to the petal, and you're just doing curved marks that are forming outwards. As I load my brush, I'm loading my brush in just white. So I'll do my second rose, start in the center, little curved marks, and they're just kind of staggered, and then you form each little curve outwards, and that forms the decorative rose. And then I'm going to do a little leaf coming out from the vase, actually 2 or 3 leaves. So I'm going to rinse my brush and use Hooker's Green Hue next. Pinch my bristles. Now actually I'm going to do white, green, and yellow. So white, green, and yellow to give it kind of more of a yellow-green color, and the white helps that green to show up. The yellow helps to kind of make it more of a yellow-green. So I'm going to twist my brush as I'm loading it, get that color right there on the end of the bristles, and do a little line, and then pressing the brush, stamping the brush almost to create little rounded oval shaped leaves. So there's one green stem piece and then another. So you're just pressing the brush, and then there's one going up between the 2 roses. And you're welcome to change this if you want. And sometimes I like to take the roses a step further and paint little dots on the inside. So I'm going to take my brush in yellow and do little yellow dots in the middle of the rose, just in the center. And then I'm going to take little black dots and do the same thing without kind of smearing that yellow. Next, I'm going to take the color gold, which is optional. If you don't want to use gold, you can use a different color. We're going to start decorating the spines of the books, so we can do some fun decorative patterns with this. I'm going to start with the round brush and the gold, and I'm going to start with the blue book. So I'm going to do a set of lines. I like the gold because it's a little translucent and it's got that shimmer, the metallic shimmer, so when you kind of turn your painting at an angle, you can see that metallic color. I'm going to do the same thing over here, do a set of double lines. And then I'm going to do kind of like a thicker area with the gold. And you're welcome to get more creative with this if you want to do more intricate patterns. And then I'm going to take the gold and do this one. I'm going to do like a solid area in the center. And then I'm going to paint like a spiral design. Still using the gold, like a spiral S. And little dots. We don't have to use gold for all of the patterns. You can use other colors. So I'm actually going to use black for this one. So I'm going to take, you don't even have to rinse your brush. You can just grab your black. I'm adding a little bit of water into that so I can make the paint a little bit more flowing. But I'm just going to do a set of double lines on this book. And then maybe outline work on this one. I'll do another set of double lines. Keep in mind that we're going to add some lettering on the sides of these books, so I'm going to leave like the middle part of the spine blank so that I have room for my words, titles that I'm going to write on the books. I'm going to do more gold on this one. The green and gold look really pretty, and I'll do little polka dots. The gold is subtle enough to where if we need to, the black lettering will show over it, but we can also add a white background to our quotes or letters or titles. I'm just doing more little gold dots over here. For this blue book, I'm going to do little spirals with the gold. And next I'm going to paint another set of roses on my lower shelf. These are not going to be in a vase, they're just on the shelf. So double load your brush in the Alizaren and the white and make your rose shape first. So it's like a circle, but the edges of the circle are kind of these curved edges. So this one is kind of the opposite. I started out light, so I did my little curved petal shapes darker so that it can show up. I'm going to do a second rose that's on the lower left part of the vase. So again, alizarin and white. Start with your base color. So your base shape, actually. Rinse the brush. And you can either go lighter or darker. I'm going to go darker since this is kind of a lighter color. So I'm going to rinse my brush and load it in just the alizarin. And start in the center and do your little curved strokes that go outwards for the petals. I'm going to rinse the brush and I'm going to go back over this one with some white paint strokes for added contrast. And then take yellow and do your little yellow and black dots in the middle of both of your roses. I'm going to take green and do a set of leaves on both of the roses. So take your green, yellow, and white and your round brush, and we can do a line and your little rounded leaves. This one ended up being a little bit bigger than the one up high, and it also overlaps the books a little bit. If it's not showing up bright, go back and add like a little bit of white or yellow on one side of the leaf. Gives it some contrast. And then another set of leaves on this rose. So this one I did 2 leaf sprays. And you're welcome to add more roses or decorations on your shelves. I did more little yellow dots in the middle of that rose. And then I'm going to do more little black dots. I'm going to erase leftover chalk lines next, and you just want to really be careful with this. You want to make sure everything is dry when you're erasing and just take your time. The white chalk lines will erase with just a regular pink eraser or whatever eraser you have available. And next I'm going to add the fairy lights, which is optional, but I think it adds such a really pretty whimsical effect to the library. And I'm just going to take, this is the number 8 long round brush, so that brush with the really, really fine point. You can also do this with a white paint pen. If you want to do a black paint pen, I suppose you can, but the string light may not show up as easily as the white. So I just did kind of this long line on that shelf, twisty, and I'm going to let that dry before doing the lights. And then I'm going to use the paint pen to start writing the titles of the books. So I took this in the direction of just writing single words such as peace, love, joy. So the interpretation is that I have all of these things in my library: faith, happiness, grace. You are welcome to write these same words too, or you can take it a different direction. You can write titles of your favorite books. You can make quotes, you can do names, whatever you want to write on the books, or you can leave them blank if you don't want to write the words. So if you're finding that the words aren't showing up, you can take your brush and do like a white layer first and then do the writing on it. I'm going to take my 12 bright brush and just do some touch-ups of shadowing. This is optional if you don't feel like you want to add more shadowing, you don't need to, but I'm just going to take black and very, very lightly, dry brush style, do some shadowing over here on the front part of this book. And then the same thing over here, just adding a little bit more shadowing on this side of the book. So this blue book, I'm going to show you what you can do, what I mean by adding a white layer first before adding a word. I'm going to do grace on the blue book, but in order for that blue pen or the black pen to show up, it needs to be a little bit of contrast, lightness. So I'm going to do a white layer first, let that dry, and then I'll write the word grace on that one. So if you need to do that for all the books, you can. And also, I didn't have titles on all the books. Some of them were just decorative. I can take my white and maybe do a few touch-ups in there. I use the white to kind of outline the edging of the spine of this book. And then I'll show you how you can do the lights. So once your little fairy light wire is dry, I like to use my finger to do this. So this is just primary yellow, and you're just loading your fingertip in a teeny tiny bit of yellow, and it helps to kind of maybe wipe it off on the palette first, because you want to press and then form outwards, and it forms a really blurry circle. So that's your first layer of the light. And then you take your brush, so you can take either the 8 round or the 4 round, it doesn't matter. You're doing a little white dot on the inside of that, so a tiny dot, and then you're pressing your finger and smearing it outwards again. So that's making the inner part of the light just a little bit brighter. You're pressing and smearing outwards. You're not covering all of that first yellow dot. And then you do one last bright white dot in the center of that. That makes it look like you have these glowing fairy lights. I'm going to do one more set of lights over here in the upper right corner with the white 8 round to do the string and the little loop, and then do the little lights. I suppose we can do this before that white dries all the way. If you want to add more details to the leaves in your pathos plants, you can. This is optional. You can take your round brush and the white, and you can go in and you can do your little vein lines. So I like to start by doing, you got to do a really thin line down the middle, and then you do little lines going outwards on each side for the veins on the leaf. Completely optional if you like the way your leaves look and you want to keep it simplified. You don't have to do this step. You can also do this with a paint pen. In fact, later on, I go back with a black paint pen and re-outline those lines again with black. Some other final touch-ups for this painting are in writing the word grace on the side of this book. And if you look at the final painting, I also add the word faith on the green book, but I add a second white layer. You can also take your paint pen and kind of loosely outline some of the designs. You can make your wording a little bit thicker. I also added another orange colored rose on the top shelf so you can mix the red and the yellow to make the orange rose. You can use the black paint pen to outline vein lines or go over some of your page line texture or some of the designs on the books. But that is the conclusion of how to paint the library. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching and thanks for painting with me.